Let's get an update on the business for you now. Kate Moody's here with us in the studio. Hi there, Kate.
Hi, Laura.
The US and China could be signing a long-awaited trade deal soon, couldn't they?
That's right. We're expecting it on Wednesday, and there are still more signs that that relationship is starting to thaw. Reports suggesting that Washington plans to remove Beijing from its list of currency manipulators. Now, the Trump administration initially made that largely symbolic move about 5 months ago, accusing China of artificially lowering the value of the yuan in order to make its exports more attractive. Labeling China a currency manipulator had been a campaign pledge of Donald Trump's, as he accused China of, quote, stealing our business and factories. Meanwhile, Vice Premier Liu He is set to travel to Washington to sign that Phase 1 trade agreement on Wednesday. It will see new tariffs put on hold and more agricultural purchases from China. More details hopefully to be released in the coming days. The U.S. Trade Representative's office, meanwhile, has said they will continue to hold regular meetings to implement that deal and work towards the next stage of trade relations. President Trump, though, has suggested he could hold off on the second stage of a deal until after the election in November. Well, that report has boosted Wall Street. We've seen the S&P 500 soaring to a new record high. The Nasdaq up about 0.9% this hour. A lot of optimism ahead of that signing on Wednesday. Tesla shares also up 8%. We saw a fairly flat close for the major European indices. Just the London FTSE 100 closing above the flat line earlier on. Well, the British economy shrank in November, further raising concerns about its future as the January 31st Brexit deadline approaches. New data from the Office for National Statistics showed a sharper than expected 0.3% contraction in November. Figures for the two previous months were revised slightly upwards to 0.1% growth over that 3-month period. Drops in manufacturing and services output dragged down the economy as a whole. Well, business uncertainty was eased slightly by the Conservative Party's decisive victory in December's election, ensuring their parliamentary majority and the date of the UK's exit from the EU. The weak economic outlook has raised speculation that the Bank of England could cut interest rates, with 3 of the committee's 9 policymakers saying they'll support that move at their next meeting at the end of January. Well, all that has put pressure on the pound, which slid below $1.30 earlier on, just about flat there at $1.30 as we speak, and up just about €1.16. We'll be watching that in the run-up to the Brexit deadline. Well, talks about France's pension reforms continue after a fairly major concession by the government this weekend. Monday is the 40th day of interrupted transport in the Paris area. Lawyers around the country are also on strike, and a number of trials have been delayed. The head of France's largest union has welcomed the announcement by Prime Minister Edouard Philippe that he'll abandon the so-called pivot age, which would have raised from 62 to 64 the age at which full retirement benefits can be collected. But the CFDT has warned that it is far from the end of the story as far as it's concerned. Still more hardline unions have said that the concession is nothing but a smokescreen. They're calling for those strikes and demonstrations to continue. Meanwhile, Germany's pension system is increasingly in the spotlight as well. New figures show nearly 1 in 5 German retirees are at risk of falling under the poverty line. The figure in France is closer to 7%. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has called for an overhaul of the German system, saying it's both too expensive to keep going and not enough to support an aging population. Sam Bradpeace has more.
For decades, Germany was seen as an economic powerhouse, a model for growth, efficiency and fiscal responsibility. But the growing number of pensioners left counting their pennies paints another picture. The number of seniors at risk of poverty has risen by 1/3 since 2010. That means more than 3 million people, nearly 1/5 of Germany's pensioner population, are living on less than €13,600 per year. Part of the problem lies in the country's pension system. Ursula worked for 46 years as an architect. Now, in her 80s, she gets €833 per month.
I was shocked when I saw this pitiful amount. After so many years of working and having raised 3 children, I couldn't believe it.
Germany has a pay-as-you-go pension system tied to earnings, with combined payments coming from the state, employers and individuals. This leaves low-paid workers and the self-employed particularly disadvantaged.
Having hobbies or going on holiday, it's simply impossible.
It is shameful in a rich country like Germany.
In light of the crisis, the government has struck a deal to guarantee a basic pension for low-income workers. The retirement age is set to increase to 67 by 2031, but the central bank has warned that an increase to 69 will be required to take pressure off a system that could crack under an ageing population.
Boeing's new chief executive has taken over at the troubled aviation giant. David Calhoun says he's confident in the company's future, and he called on employees to, quote, hold themselves accountable to the highest standards of safety and quality. He'll be trying to restore the reputation and financial outlook as Boeing struggles to regain its footing. Camille Nedlek has more.
Boeing is betting on Chairman David Calhoun to get them out of its ongoing crisis. At 63, he's a veteran, having spent 10 years on the board of Boeing and over 20 years at American engineering conglomerate General Electric. He's viewed by many as a safe pair of hands. Announcing his appointment in December, Boeing said that a change in leadership was necessary to restore confidence in the company. Calhoun has got his work cut out for him. He'll have to get the beleaguered 737 MAX back in the air, foster better ties with regulators who've lost trust in the company, and detoxify the brand. After 2 air disasters left 346 people dead. Investigators in both crashes pointed the finger at Boeing's anti-stall mechanism, MCAS. The aviation giant had insisted pilots did not need expensive flight simulation training to use MCAS. It now says they do. Just last week, as part of a pledge to transparency, Boeing handed over hundreds of emails to the FAA, the US air regulator, including messages that cast an unflattering light on the company, with 2 Boeing employees saying 8 months before the first crash that they would not put their families on a 737 MAX plane. Boeing is the largest exporter in the US. It has a staggering 137,000 employees across all 50 states, and many more suppliers and airlines have close ties to the firm. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said on Sunday that the crisis could slow US growth in 2020 by as much as 0.5 percentage point.
A new chapter in that Boeing saga.
Yeah, that's a long one, isn't it? All right, Kate, thank you very much indeed. Kate Moody there with the business.